Hello, welcome back. Hope you had a good little break. We want to close up with our segment on silencing the noise of your ex.
Yeah, you brought up such a good point that I wanted to speak to when you were saying, when we hear something, often enough, we tend to believe it. And I think so many times, if your ex is telling you you're fat or if, your ex is silencing you, it goes back to that like power thought of, you date at the level of your self worth. I mean, obviously, these guys have a low self worth, a low self esteem that they need to make, their mates feel, worse than
Inferior.
they do. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think in speaking to the ridiculousness of that thought, and oftentimes that thought not having any truth to it is so
Mm-hmm.
important because you have to take you know, those kind of criticisms from where it comes. And it usually comes from a man that does not think
That's
much
such a
of
good point.
himself.
You're right. The source means everything. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you can start to think about how the source has no credibility in the space,
Yeah.
my ex who used to say that was overweight. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. So yeah, great point. So something that you can do at home, besides kind of go through the steps, something that's really simple is we're going to send you a worksheet, and it's going to look like this. There's actually two of the same thing in here, so you can cut it in half. And what you first do with this worksheet is you write down a way in which your ex defeated you. So, I gave you an example, Janice gave you an example. I'm sure you have plenty of your own, but in a way in which you felt less than by something that he did or that he said. And it also could be something he didn't do, or didn't say. So maybe it's that he never complimented you when you have a new outfit, be getting ready to go out for a date, and he would never compliment you, which is should be expected, and therefore you felt defeated. You felt less than. So that's the first part of this activity. Is you're going to write down the action or the words, and then you want to rank it from a scale of 1 to 10. One being that there was no truth to it, and 10 being that there was total truth. So going back to my example of my ex saying that I was fat, I wasn't fat. But to be fair, I wouldn't have put there was no truth to it because I always felt like I could lose a few pounds here and there. But the truth of it was probably at a 2. I processed it as he was being totally truthful. And I processed it as it was a 10, which is why it had such power over me and could make me feel so bad. Because the truth of the matter is, I only really felt at about a 2 with that statement. And then finally, you want to write down a way that you can silence that noise. So, a power thought or a power action that you can do when that noise loops through your mind. So, it might be something in my case of, again, I am in the body I am supposed to be in. I look as I will look as good as I feel. Something like that, to carry you through.
Also think, and if you can't go there, I mean, think back to all those people who like would die to have your body. Like people that have complimented, like I would kill to have your butt, or you know what I mean, like
It's
because you
true.
as much times as you've been criticized, you've also been complimented.
And isn't that a funny thing how we it's the negative stuff that loops through our mind. It's like front and center.
Yeah.
And you're right. We have to like remind ourselves that wait a second. There have been a lot of people who have acted differently towards me or said things differently towards me. So again, that sort of devalidates the truth of that person's statement.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
might just be like a party of one in their opinion.
I think too, like for me being silenced, I just immediately thought I was boring,
Aww.
and I don't know anyone that would define me as boring, complex more so than boring. um, but yeah, I mean it's just a matter of kind of going back and you know kind of pumping up your self esteem.
Which you can do. Okay. So the next part we want to talk about is becoming what you want to date. Um, and this is a really powerful segment of our class, because truly we can only ask for what it is that we're capable of giving. And I'm going to say it again because it's true. We can only ask what we are capable of giving to others. And that's why we want to concentrate on becoming the person that it is that we want to date. And there's lots of ways to do this. I mean, you can even look at when you fill out the form that Janice showed you about what you deserve in a relationship, and if you got it or you didn't get it, it's also important to look at that and say, is this something that I give in a relationship? because we can't ask for what it is that we can't give. In fact, one of the core ways resentment is built in relationships is when is when one is when the paradigm is balanced, right? So one person's giving and the other person's not giving, and it won't always be equal, but at the end of the day, it should feel pretty equal. So when that balance is off kilter, their resentment is built in a relationship. So while partnerships, can certainly thrive on complementary abilities, it's important that things you want most out of a relationship you are providing for yourself so that you don't become dependent on that person, i.e., your self esteem isn't dependent on that person always telling you that you look hot. You know you feel hot. Do you want to hear it sometimes? Of course. But do you need it 3 times a day? You shouldn't need it 3 times a day. And again, what I was saying before is you also want to be able to give that too. Can you give compliments to other people? Some people can't. So, I'll give you another example. Financial security is important to you, and this is a huge one for a lot of women, and rightfully so. You need to be able to provide it for yourself. Because let's say Mr. Wonderful, he happens, to be financially secure. He's great. That's a big plus for you. He's got his own job, his own business, money in the bank, whatever it is. And then let's say he loses it all. Bad investments, loses his job, something like that. Then what happens? You go into a panic mode because you've been so reliant on him being that provider for you. So it's not the best move. You want to be able to make sure that you can financially provide for yourself just in case. So relationships go through transitionary periods. So you don't want to rely on somebody to fulfill your own needs because essentially that just sets you up for disappointment.
I think too this goes into that saying that we all heard and once, you know, had an ah moment off of is when Tom Cruise says, "You complete me."
I hate
It's
that.
like it so goes along with
It's
this
so
because it's
true.
like we should really enter relationships whole. Many of us don't, but and we
Yeah,
expect that other person to kind of fill us up.
it is a really sad philosophy that, and it's just ingrained in us. The whole I'm looking for my other half.
Right.
It's like your other half is right inside you, and the idea is to be whole, hook up with somebody who's whole, and then
Yeah.
you're really powerful to some. Um, because if something goes haywire, then you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, you want to leverage what we call, your 100% ownership. We talk a lot about owning 100% of your 50%. And one of the great powers of this is that you get to look in your own rearview mirror into your history with as much objectivity as possible to unveil what wonderful things you brought to the table in your relationship and where you have room for growth. So, this is all about ownership. It's about looking at your relationship realistically, about what was positive, what wasn't positive, what were you responsible for contributing to in the mess, because it always takes two to make things work and it takes two to make things fall apart. Again, these don't need to be even. It doesn't need to be like he did 5 things wrong, you did 5 things wrong. But it's just about really looking, because that's the only way that you can grow forward and think about how you want to behave differently in a relationship, not just how you want a new man to behave differently, but also how you want to behave differently, what you can do. So we recommend that this week you take a little bit of time. This also might be something you can use your journal for, to think about in what way you are a great partner and in what ways you weren't. And if you've had more than one ex, this is a good exercise to do a couple of times, because you can start to see patterns. And then if you want to take it a step further, take a moment to toast to your strides. We're big on celebrating anything for any reason. So we think that you want to toast to the progress that you're making and begin to set action plans to start massaging those areas where you need work. If you need some ideas on where you may not have been your best possible self, let us know. We're happy to kind of help show you some of our personal experiences, continue to. All right. The other part of becoming what you want to date is noticing that our reflections often represent our self desires. So essentially, we're all creatures of habit. We go to the same grocery stores, we buy the same stuff there, we take the same route in our car to even get there. So it's not surprised that many times we end up what we call, dating the same guy in different shoes, because habit is comfortable. It's when we break away from that where we feel out of our zone and we start to get anxiety. But if all of a sudden, think about it, the grocery store you always went to, it wasn't there anymore, or it wasn't just a good grocery store, they didn't have the things you liked, or it became too expensive, what would you do? you'd be forced to look for a better alternative. So when it comes to guys, the same kind of thing should apply. What you've been doing hasn't been working. So you've got to look for an alternative, something that is better. Again, it's critical to look at your dating archives, like all your X files, and pay attention to the core of who you were dating and who you specifically were when you were dating, and note the similarities from guy to guy, because more often than not, the breakdown from one to the next has the same underlying variable. This is what we call rinse and repeat dating. So just like you rinse and repeat shampoo and conditioner in the shower, we oftentimes rinse and repeat when we date. We date the same kind of guys over and over. There might be a subtle twist that they don't look or feel the same, but essentially they're providing us with the same thing. And that same thing obviously isn't working for us. Now, the key here, really what this has to do with unearthing your worth, is that we often seek in others or in relationships what we actually want to have within ourselves. It's some sort of lack that's within us, and we see it in somebody else, and we feel like they can provide that for us. So, for example, women who are attracted to artists usually love them because artists tend to be sensual, they're talented, they're admired, but they're also looking to fulfill their own artist within. That's how we feel. We feel like women who look for artists are looking to fulfill that own artist within. So chances are these women, if they tended to their own artistic desires, say through like taking a class, then their desire to be, with the sexy but oftentimes selfish artist would subside. Another example, and this was completely my entire dating history, was dating the emotionally crippled guy. So the guy whose emotions are a complete disaster. He either doesn't have them or has too many of them or can't sort them out. Really immature in the emotional space. So women, I can speak myself, was attracted. I was always attracted to wounded guys because I am a natural caretaker. I've been a natural caretaker ever since I was taking care of my single mom as a kid. So I gravitated towards these kind of guys who couldn't really take very good care of themselves because it made me feel needed. It made me feel important. And I worried that if I was with a guy who had his shit together, then what purpose did I serve? If I wasn't going to be able to be what we call his man mechanic. So for me, what I had to do when I recognized that was I had to figure out other ways that I could help people. People that weren't dependent on me, but people that just appreciated my help. So for me, that meant volunteering and helping people who really actually literally could not help themselves. And that gave me a huge boost of energy, one that was far more fulfilling than helping a grown man who actually could take care of himself, but instead chose to just suck the life out of me. So after I recognized that, I no longer was with men who were incapable of taking care of themselves.
I think too, you know, it, we all really kind of get to this point in the journey of dating, and we hear it so often with women where they're like, I can't believe I have to go through another breakup, or
I'm here
why
again.
can't I find a good guy, or like what is it about me that's undateable, or whatever it may be, and it's coming back to the fact that like this obviously isn't working for you. You need to go back and look at the rinse and repeat dating. It's like you're obviously dating the same type of guy with the same type of issue because it's something that you need to take care of, within.
Yeah, I mean, they serve a purpose.
Right.
It's doing like my example. For me, it made me feel important. It made me feel like I was needed, and that is an important thing. And that shouldn't go away, but it just needs to be fulfilled in a much healthier way,
Yeah.
and not a codependent way. And like I said, once I finally got out there and was helping other people, I was like, oh, I can fulfill this. This does make me feel important, but it doesn't need to be fulfilled with my partner.
Yeah. No, good stuff. Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to have you create your own iceberg.